David, let me turn to you now. You mostly work in the corporate field, developing software for corporations. What are some of the threats facing corporations? Are they a different type of threat than the government might expect?
I think there's similarities between the two. I think there's different types of information that the hackers and the activists and the rogue states are actually looking for. I think the assumptions that corporations have made until recently, where they've just chosen to put antivirus or give you a simple standardized desktop, have historically been good up until recently. But with the power and the connectivity of the internet, there's significant risks and significantly greater entry points into the corporate environment.
Now, what would be the typical motivation of somebody who is trying to break into a corporate network? Is it to steal money, to steal secrets, to just make it hard for that organization to function? Can you profile a typical threat?
I think the answer to that is yes, across the board, but I think the other key component is reputational. I think there's scenarios from a corporate perspective that if there is a hack of the corporation, it's a multitude of issues for that corporation. Their reputation can cause significant shareholder loss, significant customer loss, but what it also creates, it creates a scenario that the data for the individuals and their customers are also at risk.
There was a recent case with Sony. They were hacked allegedly by the North Koreans because the North Koreans took offense at a movie that Sony had made.
Yes.
And so they got private emails sent by top officials of Sony, which were not too complimentary about some of the people they do business with. I mean, that could be pretty damaging.
Without a doubt. And I think in Sony's case, they actually didn't prepare themselves for this exposure by putting in the proper security protections. It was just simple email messaging security software that they could use.
Do most companies prepare themselves for the next hack, or do they prepare themselves for the last hack?
I think historically it's been reactionary in nature, just like antivirus. I think now what you need to do is you need to look at everything in a real-time fashion. You need complete visibility of your entire infrastructure, your entire environment, and that's a key component that you haven't done historically.
Now, there are a lot of companies that make computer security software. What's the approach that Ziften takes that makes its products different from the competitors?
I think we take an approach where we live and breathe security, and the key component is to not only improve your security posture, but also to work with your environment and give you full visibility as to what your individuals are doing on the network. So in the scenario, like Chris mentioned before, about users and their desktops, etc., the scenario has been with a standardized desktop that you actually didn't worry about the user interaction with that device. Now we provide that visibility that enables you to look at things in a real-time fashion.
So whenever somebody logs on to a system, your software detects that login. It can see what that person is doing.
So we would see what the person is doing from the log stroke all the way through if we wish, but we also can see the internet access, things that are running in the foreground, background, but basically all that they're doing from the software perspective to the network to the perimeter of the infrastructure.
Now, is there somebody in a control room somewhere monitoring this?
The answer is yes. The data would actually, the way we've built our data structurally is to complement a lot of the existing security infrastructure tools to a security operations center.
So would that be a Ziften employee? So in other words, if you purchase the Ziften software, a Ziften employee is monitoring the results and reporting if anything suspicious happens?
We currently work with the customers, and they actually provide the security operations center, but we also provide additional analysis and analytics that enable you to understand forensically what's going on.
Now, how do you pick up a threat? Like, let's say somebody logs in to your system, and it's a legitimate username and it's a legitimate password, but they seem to be doing things that that person hasn't done much of before. Do you, like, observe the context for unusual behavior, even for a person who has the right to be logged on?
The answer is yes. We'll look at context and attribution. We'll look at changes in binary behavior. For example, if a person is logged in on a system at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night and the system is running at 98% utilization, we'll understand and flag this and work to quarantine the device off the network, because obviously something's wrong at 2 a.m. on a Saturday.
And if you quarantine the device, is there any penalty paid by the hacker so they wouldn't do it again? Or is this a purely defensive game where you try to protect your space, but once someone's been pushed back, there's nothing to prevent them from trying again?
I think the answer to that is they can continue to try, but in the meantime, we'll have flagged that anomaly in the system, and we'll understand when it occurs every time.
Okay. Do hackers ever get actually caught and go to jail?
Absolutely.
I know it's happened on a number of occasions, but is that the exception rather than the rule?
I think it's very hard to track them down because of the advent of the internet and the public internet providers and the communications infrastructure. They could be anywhere around the world.
Now, how do you know what is the proper approach? I mean, the approach of the hackers is constantly evolving. So do you have to consider, like a chess game, think a few moves ahead, what are they likely to try next, and plan for that?
I think it's very much a chess game. I think what you need to do, though, is you need to make the assumption that you will be hacked and then prepare defensively to take measures to protect yourself as best as possible while implementing a very strong security operations center and a security posture and having the tools necessary.
Is hacking so ubiquitous that you can assume it's going on all the time, like one hacker is trying to break into 100 different companies at the same time, and one of them will enable him to get in, and that's where he'll do his work?
From what I've seen, there's not a lot of randomness. It's usually targeted attacks that actually provide the most damage. There are some people out there that may contribute to the general environment and just try things across the board, but in general, it's very targeted.
So what companies are the juiciest targets? Which type of companies need to be most worried about hackers?
Obviously, large financials. That's at the tip of the umbrella.
Like credit card companies?
Credit card companies, I think utilities, because of the infrastructure like Chris mentioned about our global grid, our United States grid. I think in general, our very way of life has to be protected on a daily basis.
Does there come a point where computer security becomes so expensive it almost makes the internet not worth it anymore?
I don't think it'll ever get that expensive because we're in a capitalist society and we are driven in a lot of ways by profitability. I think because of that, there's always some level of operating cost to keep yourself secure.
Now, how is Ziften doing? Is it getting a lot of customers, or are people finding themselves satisfied with the software? And yes, it's answering the threats, and they haven't been hacked since?
Yeah, we're in a very significant growth phase. We've established ourselves with very large major institutions, and we're adding continuous value to those environments.